Well, welcome back, everyone. It is 2:10 p.m., and I call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. I'll call the roll, please.
Ms. Clementi?
I'm here.
Mr. Farrell?
PM, and I call this meeting of the Board of Education to order. I'll call the roll, please.
Ms. Clementi?
I'm here.
Mr. Farrell?
Here.
Judge Mays?
Here.
Mr. Voss?
Here.
Dr. Wright?
Here.
Superintendent Macaluso, do you have any corrections or modifications to the agenda?
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, there are no corrections or modifications to the agenda.
Then I will move that we approve the agenda, or we adopt the agenda as presented.
I second.
I'll call the vote, please.
Ms. Clementi? Mr. Farrell?
Aye.
Judge Mays?
Aye.
Mr. Voss?
Aye.
Dr. Wright?
Aye.
And with that, we'll jump right into our reports. Superintendent Macaluso.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to the chair of the Citizens Bond Advisory Committee, who is Mr. Ken Lane, and Mr. Matt Trujillo will be joining him. Matt serves as our vice president for the CBAC, and they will be presenting their quarterly annual report. Mr. Lane?
Thank you. Can you see me on the screen? Okay.
We can see you and hear you just fine.
Okay. Good afternoon, Superintendent Macaluso and members of the school board. You have previously been provided the full 2020 December quarterly / annual 2020 report, so I'll not go through it line by line. One item I failed to include in the recap of committee activity is the public communication initiative we have joined in with the district. On behalf of the committee, Mike Donald, Bob Lawson, and I have worked with the district to produce videos that will appear on the district website showing the sites for the new East and Centennial High Schools. Mike Donald also participated in the video during the demolition of Heroes and in the press conference when the last part of Heroes demolition took place. In all cases, our representation of the CBAC were made clear. The district shares our videos with PubleShares and Choose Pueblo, which provide a repository of positive information about the community for public consumption and business recruitment. Of course, the biggest takeaway from this report is the committee's assessment of the bond program and its expenditures. As you can read, the 6 committee members present at this January's meeting unanimously agreed that they have not seen anything in their review of information provided by the district that makes them believe the district made expenditures inconsistent with the voter-approved bond and the district list of capital repairs and replacements provided to the public and to the committee. I can also verify that the 7th active committee member is in agreement with that assessment. This assessment is stated in the negative only because from an auditing perspective, the committee can only rely on the information provided to it by the district and as supported by the documents the district has posted. None of the committee members, of course, have firsthand knowledge or involvement in the contracts or expenditures. Nevertheless, I think the assessment is a positive one for the district specifically and for the public in general. And we can make this assessment because committee members have continuously requested and received throughout 2020 detailed information as to the contracts, the specific projects, and their expenditures. Details such as types of bids, number of bids received, whether they are from Pueblo County businesses, exactly when invoices have been paid, and the documents supporting those payments. We have respectfully but aggressively questioned district staff at each meeting regarding project specifics, projected and actual costs, budgets, and timelines. While the various worksheets and spreadsheets identified in the annual report that have been developed may seem redundant, It is redundancy of the information that has reassured the committee the projects and expenditures are as promised. And I think the key to the ability of the committee to do its work is being able to review the contract and payment documents for each project. It was never enough for the committee to simply accept what it was told by the district. That would be an abdication of our responsibilities and as entrusted to the committee by the public's vote. Posting these documents on the district's website for everyone to see has been, in my opinion, the single best thing the district could do to earn the public's trust. The committee and district staff occasionally butted heads in obtainment of information. I am certain that as lay people, we asked confusing and what might seem to be elementary questions that were irritating. And let's face it, no one likes having others looking over their shoulders as they work, complicating and extending their work days amidst the numerous other tasks they are actually employed to do. But to their credit, Dave Horner and Bob Lawson have provided all of the information the committee has requested, and then some. And they have done so professionally and patiently. It has been a good relationship. Finally, on behalf of the committee, I cannot say enough good about the work of Carrie Jones and Ashley Shepard. They are troopers, and surely some kind of recognition can be given to them by the district for the extra time and effort they've put in to support not only their bosses, but in particular the committee. Ultimately, at least as 2020 goes, the district is executing the bond language and expending the bond revenues as promised. And I believe the committee is fulfilling the responsibilities entrusted to it by the voters in passing the school bond. With that, I'll turn it over to Matt if he has any additional comments.
Very well said, Ken. The only thing I'd add is I believe 2020 was very productive for our committee, and I'd like to applaud Dave and Bob for their work in helping us get to where we're at today. I hope you find the report we've presented very beneficial to you. And if there's anything we can do differently, any other information, we're open to comment. Thank you.
That's it for our report.
Thank you. Dr. Wright, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions, but I want to commend the committee. I'm so grateful we have the committee to look over our shoulders to assure the public that we're doing what we said we would do. I'm grateful for those who got the committee together. I want to give you kudos. Grateful to Dave and Bob and superintendent and the staff members that you mentioned. I'm just grateful because our heart desire is to do the best for our community. I'm glad that you can confirm that we're doing just that. So thank you.
You're welcome.
Judge Mays, any questions? Judge Mays, are you there?
Just a reminder, it's *6 if you need to mute or unmute, Judge.
Taylor, can you hear me now?
I can, yeah.
Okay, this is going to be a hassle all the way through this because of what's going on this afternoon. But I just wanted to thank the committee for the work that they've done and their vigilance to their task. But I also want to be very complimentary of our own staff for complying with exactly what we told the voters we were going to do if they were willing to trust us with this bond initiative. And it's clear to me from the report from Mr. Lane that's been done, and I'm very pleased that we have been transparent in everything we've done and that we're moving along. And I am excited about the time when we're going to be able to open the doors to those schools. So thank you.
Mr. Farrell?
First, to the committee, I want to say thank you for your constant diligence in going through all of this and following up and making sure that you do understand what's happening and making sure that you have the information that you need. I know it can probably seem daunting at times, but I appreciate everyone on the committee going through it and following through. And I was also excited to hear about the videos that you mentioned. So thank you for taking an active role in that as well. and helping share the story of what's going on with the bond. I think that that's great. And I also want to thank Mr. Horner and Mr. Lawson for their work with the committee and providing you with the information that you need. Thank you.
Ms. Clementi?
I would just echo the thanks and the gratefulness to all for their work. And point of personal privilege, if I may.
Sure.
I just need to acknowledge that I've just received the devastating news that a former student of mine has passed on. And so if I seem a little off or shaken, that's what's going on with me right now.
Please accept our condolences for your loss, Barb.
Thank you.
And I just want to echo my colleagues as well, Mr. Lane and Mr. Trujillo. Thank you. And thank you to the entire committee for all of your hard work. And just want to say thank you to our staff as well for your diligence and transparency. We really do appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We'll move next to the Charter School Annual Report, Evaluation Report, Pueblo School for Arts and Sciences.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to Mr. Tom Weston, who serves as our district charter school liaison. Welcome, Mr. Weston. And I believe the first report is the annual report for PSAS.
Right. Thank you, Superintendent Macaluso, members of the board. Good to see you again, virtually. Want to give you the kind of the quick review for PSAS. I know Mr. Martin's on the line. Ms. Martinez is also on the line, I think. Ms. Miller too, if you have questions once we get done. A little bit different of a annual report this year due, of course, to the COVID. Not as much available in terms of student achievement data. But I will note that PSAS was able to provide not only beginning of year assessment measures, but also they had gotten through the middle of year assessment. And so I was able to include that, and that does show some growth and progress, which is good. As always, the annual report focuses on academic performance and growth, financial viability, operations, and governance. Those are the key areas we'll look at. In terms of some academic news, Fulton Heights, and we'll do Fulton Heights and Jones, go back and forth. Beginning of year assessments, really with the exception of just a couple of grades, 50% or more of the kids met or exceeded the projected benchmark in the NWEA maps in math and in reading. Few lower scores on the language usage in science, 5th through 8th grade. Some of those in the high 20s to mid 30% meeting or exceeding. At Jones, again, several grades were listed there, and I think Mr. Martin could probably explain, having to do with being online or in person or hybrid. You'll see different levels of grade levels with letters, and they can probably explain that. But even so, looking at it, half a dozen or so below the 50% mark on meeting or exceeding the benchmark on NWEA maps at the beginning of the year. But they also had a number in the high 60s and 70s in some areas as well. So that was a good thing. The e-learning K-8 language usage in science was a bit lower, 2nd and 3rd grade and 4th and 5th grade. Again, not terribly surprising in terms of what's been going on. Fulton Heights, in terms of some DIBELS testing, they provided at this point beginning and middle of year. And there were some nice moves in terms of getting kids from well below benchmark to approaching to at or above benchmark. You could see a nice growth in a lot of the areas. You want to see, of course, from beginning of year to middle of year, the percentage well below go down, and obviously at and above, you want to see those numbers go up. And in a lot of cases, they certainly did that, and I know that was provided. Jones, very much a similar story in some cases. but not as much as success as perhaps Fulton Heights. But in some cases, the percentage well below benchmark, kindergarten, first, second, third, was actually a little higher at the middle of the year, which is something I know that they'll be focusing on. So an uneven performance, but not that surprising when you're moving from an online to an in-person to an online. It's difficult. What I can say is, and it's true of both the charter schools, but since we're focused on PSAS, like all the schools in district as well, trying first to track down the kids, trying to get them the technology, finding out that there are many families who simply didn't have internet access. So it's wonderful to give them a Chromebook, but once they get it, they're really not sure what to do with it because they don't have internet access. So doing that and tracking those kids, and of course keeping them engaged, some sort of regular attendance and engagement, all of those things obviously will play in. But the staff really did and continues to do in the leadership direction under Mr. Martin a terrific job of maintaining that contact. And I know that they, along with you, hope to be getting back in person soon for the balance of the academic year, if at all possible. And end of year assessment numbers may be quite a bit better. In terms of the finance, PSAS continues to be on very solid financial footing. Revenues exceed expenses. Table reserves are established. Operating reserves are certainly sufficient. The most recent audit was clean and without comment. So no issues in finance, and there hasn't been with PSAS in the 11 years that I've served as liaison. In terms of operations and governance, which is probably in some ways the more significant thing to talk about, in the last 10 months, PSAS has had significant changes since the last annual report that I brought to you. 2 new principals are in place at the Jones campus and at Fulton Heights, so those from last year. And so that was a significant change, certainly. Mr. Martin continues as interim executive director, and the board has asked Mr. Martin to continue in that role at least through the end of the year. And I do want to say again, under Mr. Martin's leadership, 3 new leaders. Miss Kim McLaughlin leads the Jones campus, Mr. Hershon leads the Fulton Heights campus, and then Mr. Efren Tapia, he leads the e-learning process. So there's really 3 leadership in there. It's also important to note Mr. Martin's leadership, in my observations, has brought great stability and calm to PSAS and that school environment and the community. Morale is very high compared to a year ago. The faculty and staff are working in concert, working through some very unprecedented times. I think it's noteworthy that in less than a calendar year, Mr. Martin and his team have restored trust in school leadership with faculty and have restored a sense of trust and a positive relationship with the community. The issues that we saw last year in the fall have calmed down significantly. I have not had a contact from anybody since June with any concerns, and that is a good thing. The board of directors currently has 1 opening. Mr. Parker serves as president. The office of vice president is open. Joanne Ballers continues board treasurer. Jennifer Chavez, secretary. Andy Holloman is a community member. They do have 1 spot open. Again, no significant issues within the community, which is great. Obviously, last spring, there was a bit of friction between PSAS and District 60 in terms of the challenge to the exclusive chartering authority, which was resolved by the state board. But again, since that point, there have been no issues that I've been made aware of. And I know that PSAS, and Mr. Martin can probably speak to this, very appreciative most recently of the quick assistance of district leadership and the board to get 2 additional grants from the Colorado Department of Education to facilitate the bond money. It's been a very good relationship there. So the final piece with PSAS, just so you know, PSAS made application to the Charter School Institute to establish a multi-district online school. It will not be authorized by District 60. I spoke with the executive director of CSI, and she told me that they had approved that application, and so they will continue there. District 60 will still authorize them for the Fulton Heights and the Jones campus, but they are expanding their network a bit, and believe that their plan for the online is to be underway next fall. So it's kind of the overview of PSAS, and I'll stop at this point if there are questions for myself or for Mr. Martin or Ms. Martinez or anybody else.
Thank you. Dr. Wright, do you have any questions?
Thank you for your report. I do not have any questions at this time, but thank you, Mr. Weston.
Judge Mays?
No, I do not have any questions at this time. Thank you.
Mr. Farrell?
No questions. Thank you, Mr. Weston.
And Ms. Clementi?
I have a question about how it works in a network with two schools under the district's charting authority and another, obviously, online school that is under another authority. Are there two separate boards? Are they? I am having a hard time wrapping my head around how that works.
As I understand it, and I'll certainly defer to Mr. Miller, Mr. Baum, Ms. Barber, the network board stays in place as the overarching governing board. The online school would have a separate budget and reporting responsibilities, in this case to CSI, just as the home school that PSAS runs would have responsibilities to report to District 70, because that's where the home school is located. But as I understand it, the PSA board currently in place would still be the overall network board. Not that that couldn't change in the future. I know that's been discussed at PSAS, if there should be, you know, a board for Jones, a board for Fulton Heights, and then a network board on top of that. But again, let me defer to Mr. Baum, Ms. Barber, or Mr. Miller. They could probably be more accurate about that.
This is Brad Miller. Can you hear me? So I'm an attorney. I work with PSAS, and it's my expectation that we'll be the same board. This is a network. It is recognized under Colorado law, and there's a few years ago there was some working with Colorado Department of Education and their finance department to make sure that things like audits between separate authorizers are appropriately managed, but that's been worked through in the course of the last several years, and there are other networks extant that have similar operations, and I'll defer to Mr. Bump or Melissa if there's further. But it's a great question, Mrs. Clementi, but it is a workable sort of scenario.
So I'd be delighted if you could share with me other situations where this is in place, and I'm also wondering what happens with students who move back and forth between schools within the network.
So, okay, thank you for the good questions. First one comes to mind is James Irwin Charter Schools, which actually operates under three separate authorizers, the Charter School Institute, Harrison School District, and District 49, Falcon School District. Global Village is a collaborative that has a similar scenario with multiple districts in which it resides, and there are multiple of Charter School Institute schools that are constituted as networks that have facilities in multiple districts. The Colorado Early Colleges being a prime example of that. Your follow-up question, I'm so sorry, was?
It seems to me like those perhaps are not comparable examples, but I'll be happy to look into that further. My other question is, how does it work with students who move back and forth between schools within the two different entities?
So we have a bit of an archaic system, as you know, in Colorado, where the count day is a single day in October or a single period of time in October when it comes to online programming. But just as it would be the case with our two schools and the district and the exchanges that happen, I'll ask Mr. Bump or Melissa to address how it might impact the district. I don't want to sort of pronounce that. I would say that the James Irwin Charter School Network is very comparable in the sense that they have three very separate authorizers, three distinct campuses, actually 4 campuses. And I think that would be a good exemplar for you to consider as you look ahead at that.
Thank you.
Mr. Weston, I don't think I have any questions at this point. You're on mute there, I think.
Thank you. Sorry about that. You want me to, I don't have the agenda in front of me, move on to the renewal application, or is that?
Sure. Yeah, that'll work.
Okay. So on the heels of the annual, we're looking at the renewal application for Fulton Heights. I do want to make the distinction that, and I'll identify this as I move along, some of the recommendations, in fact, many of the recommendations made in the renewal application by the staff has more to do with the PSAS network than Fulton Heights per se, and that's kind of an important distinction, but I'll identify those as we go. Essentially, Fulton Heights submitted the renewal application, and staff reviewed it from a number of departments. I took a look at it, ESS, Mr. Horner in finance, Mr. Lawson in construction and facilities, all looked in and weighed in, curriculum instruction, Assistant Superintendent Maury, and provided the review that I've shared with you. Essentially, the application met the benchmarks needed. Certainly in the first area of introduction, basic information was no problem. Mission, staff, mobility, demographics was all fully developed, as was academic performance, academic goals, and staff qualifications. They met all of the benchmarks that are laid out in the rubric. As we move on to the academic progress of the charter school, there are a couple of things that the staff just suggested, and this not so much as a basis for renewal, but basis of just a little more robust application. PSAS has used PDEA philosophy and pedagogy since its inception. But what it didn't do in this application, and I've seen it before, and it would have been good just to have it in the application. And the staff noted this, that it didn't speak to the research rationale of the PDEA philosophy and how that aligns to their target population, which is one of the standards that we asked in the application. The results are certainly there. There's no question there. It's just for the purpose of the application, it would have been an element worth including. The research is out there for PDEA. There's nothing surprising, but it would have been good to have that in the application. The application does state that PSAS ensures their instruction is anchored in the PDEA philosophies. It just doesn't speak specifically to how it's particularly effective with their targeted population. But it's certainly true that as PSAS noted in the application, that they've established a culture of excellence using PDEA principles anchored in educating the whole child through the maker mindset of utilizing design principles to teach students how to think critically and creatively. At the next round of renewal, perhaps when Fulton and Jones come together, that would be just a good piece of information to have in the application as research backup. Curriculum is certainly aligned. That was not a problem at all. A strong rationale for the instructional philosophy. It does mention training staff and how to utilize tools for differentiation. Didn't specifically discuss the methods used to differentiate the curriculum. The application didn't specifically speak to the research that supports the curriculum chosen, but it does speak to alignment, but didn't provide the research even in a citation. It did provide research to support problem-based learning and teaching practices, and it may be that link provided the necessary rationale. We just wasn't sure, and asked PSS to confirm that. The USIPs were presented all years, policies for evaluating student performance, supplemental programming, all of those kinds of things. So this area was mostly developed. The specific suggestion that the staff had for this, and again, this is a suggestion not so much for Fulton Heights, but for the network as a whole, and that is on the issue of strategic plan. It was an element in the application. The one presented was simply a paragraph, and it was just 2 goals. And given that it is stated as a 4-year plan, the staff expressed that it should probably be more specific and comprehensive with timelines, projects, benchmarks, strategies, a link between strategic plan and board or administrative policies, just a more comprehensive plan. So the staff strongly urges PSAS, the network now again, to create a comprehensive strategic plan that incorporates long-term goals in a number of areas, from academic achievement and growth to network growth, expansion, community relations, growth, all the things you would normally see in a strategic plan. Again, they didn't want to link this to the approval of Fulton Heights or the renewal, but simply to say to the network, it would be a piece that perhaps as the school year comes to the end and into the summer, maybe the fall, would be something for them to work on. That would be helpful. There was also a question about how often the bylaws are revisited. The last revision seems to have been March 2019, and it was suggested PSAS provide a timeline for the next look and possible revision of bylaws, which happens from time to time. So that particular area, academic progress of the charter school, achievement and growth, was rated as mostly developed. Budget and finance, facility, food services, transportation. The only note was that the budget showed for Fulton Heights a budget for 300 students. The actual October enrollment was about 15% below, and so it was requested that they submit a revision reflective of the reduction. I did not get that. I don't know if Mr. Horner did or not, but that would be a good thing. Other than that, all the financial pieces were provided and in place, from budget to insurance coverage, and so that was also mostly developed. In terms of serving students with special needs, it's important to say that the PSAS and the district have enjoyed a very positive relationship and continue to in the area of working with special needs students. There's no question about that. Talk frequently and they work things through. But again, looking at just the application, this section of the application, the staff feedback was that it lacked a little bit of depth. It was a general overview in each area, but the responses lacked the detail and inferred perhaps a misunderstanding of ESS. For example, parents do not make the final decision on whether or not a child qualifies for services. The no SPED services fall under RTI, as these are separate steps to meeting student needs. So the application should not identify the minutes of services in the narrative. The services have to be based on student individual needs, not generally time bound. So it's a detail, but it's probably, I think, a significant one just to make sure that it's understood by both parties. Programming and staffing budget for educationally disadvantaged students didn't specifically address educationally disadvantaged students in terms of accommodations and staffing, professional development for staff, and those kinds of things. It was more of a general response. Students with IEPs, again, didn't specifically address that subgroup and those things, but was more of a general response of commitment to meet the needs of all students with special needs. And this was the same for the students with 504 plans, English language learners, and homeless students. More of a general overview on the application, and it would have been good to have some more specifics. Now, in each area, in terms of noted strengths in this area, which is rated partially developed, it was noted from the staff review. The application does provide a general overview of how it deals with each population. Also noted that PSAS has a positive working relationship with District 60 with respect to serving all special needs students. Communication, collaboration are hallmarks of the work between the school and the district. So in practice, it's a very good relationship. For the purpose of application, more specifics would have been appreciated. So the application rubric asks for specifics for each group, and that just wasn't as precise as perhaps it could have been. So those are a couple of areas. Again, the relationship is good. It's just the application, that particular section, it was felt that it could have been a little clearer. The final two areas, waivers. This is something that Mr. Miller, Ms. Barber, Mr. Bump will be working through. There are some waivers that have been requested. There's automatic state waivers, and those are no problem. But there are some other policies that need to be put in place by PSAS. And again, I'm going to let Mr. Bump, Mr. Miller, Ms. Barber work through those issues, and waivers was a partially developed area. Finally, the governance. It was pretty much met everything. They did a board self-evaluation, and that was provided. The only suggestion was the results of that would have been helpful to have in the application, just to see. I mean, the document is fine, just the results would have been a good thing to have. There was a question about how often the bylaws are revisited. I spoke about that earlier, and so the update there would be helpful. And so governance was partially or mostly developed. One final point on governance: PSAS did provide an organizational chart. The suggestion was consider, and this is by the way totally up to the charter. I mean, this is not something that an authorizer would mandate, but it's just a suggestion that they look at that organizational chart and consider indicating in some manner that human resources, facilities, IT, custodial, business manager are ultimately somewhere under the supervision of the executive director. Typically, major department heads report to executive director. Alternately, if they don't want to do that, some rationale. Because the way it is now, it doesn't appear that that's the case. It may be, but it just didn't appear that was the case. When we finished up with this review, I did send it to PSAS, asking them to take a look and respond if they chose to any of the suggestions that we had from the staff. I did not receive anything back in that area. They did not respond. Again, no particular deal breaker, but that was the process. So I want to thank the staff for all their work, and I'll open to any questions.
Dr. Wright, do you have any questions?
Sorry, having trouble with that little button to stay up here. Mr. Weston, my understanding from what you've said, and please clarify for me, there were specifics requested regarding the populations needing IEPs, 504, homeless are very vulnerable populations and extremely vulnerable in this time period with COVID online learning. So please help me understand why specifics are not given if they were requested.
I don't know why we didn't get a response, and maybe Mr. Martin or Ms. Martinez could respond. I do think it's what I'm trying to say is that in terms of the relationship with the district and the district's assessment of how they work with all of those subgroups, it's clear that PSAS is doing so, and doing so successfully. It just wasn't presented in the application. And so if it would have bolstered that section of the application if they would have articulated specifically the things that they are doing. It wasn't a question of are you staffing or budgeting or differentiating to meet kids with IEPs, 504s, homeless, economically disadvantaged. It just wasn't articulated in the renewal application. It's the district and the ESS staff is confident it's happening because they interact weekly. It just wasn't provided in the application in detail, and so it was just noted and therefore downgraded a bit.
So And again, you helped me. This is new to me in terms of this whole process. Can they not be required to submit that? I'm just very concerned about the population. I'm very, very, very concerned. Again, those are most vulnerable students. And if you are doing the work, why not specify?
Right. Well, I think the board certainly has the prerogative to make that request as a part of the renewal.
Mr. Weston, I think we do have maybe Teresa and Dave Martin on the line. Dave, do we have you on the line?
You do, yes, ma'am.
I would give you an opportunity to respond to that question.
Well, I think Mr. Weston kind of hit it on the head there, is that we are currently serving those populations and we are doing those things. I think given some of the actual COVID requirements and everything like that, we're going about 100 miles an hour, and we felt, I guess, at the point in time of the application that we were abiding by those and working closely. That's probably one of the closest areas that we do work with a district on, and that we had met those obligations. And we probably put less of a priority on explaining it, knowing that we were doing it as we were some of the other developed areas that needed more attention. So it was probably it probably fell down the priority list, if we're just being straightforward. It doesn't mean it doesn't mean that we can't continue to work on those things and have those things in place. But as you heard Mr. Weston say, I mean, there's everything that we've done a lot of work thus far to this year to get things kind of right track, as we call it. And as there's some work to be done, absolutely. And we recognize that. So, but I can guarantee you those students are being served.
And Dr. Wright,
I'm sorry,
Dr. Wright, I would say that if that is an area of concern for the board certainly has the prerogative to ask for additional information. Is that correct, Mr. Weston?
I would certainly think so. You'd certainly get that, and it would basically be just providing documentation of, as Mr. Martin said, what is currently happening, just so that it's documented.
Well, I would appreciate that. I would like to make that request. And Mr. Martin, I'm very, very glad to hear you say it's being done. And I would request that it be documented so that we have documentation. Thank you so much.
Judge Mays, any questions for you?
Mr. Weston, thank you for your report. I'm looking at page 18. It's the end of the first full paragraph. That's probably not true. It's the last sentence before the first full paragraph on that page. I hope we can communicate with each other on this. And what I'm going to do is read the last sentence. And I think you might have answered this, but I want to be certain in my own mind. The last sentence is, and tell me if you're on the same page. The parent always gets to make the final decision based on the recommendation from the ESS teacher, classroom teacher, and school psychologist. Are you following with me?
Mr. Weston, you're muted.
Sorry, that's the new line in 21. Yes, that was the response from the district staff to that particular area.
Is that accurate?
I accepted their expertise when they sent it, so I didn't verify it, but I assumed that it is accurate.
So if the parent, if the ESS teacher, the classroom teacher, and the school psychologist all disagree with the parent and do not believe it's in the best interest of the student, it does not matter. The parent can go ahead and exercise his or her own will.
Yeah, my experience is parents have the ultimate. You can refuse services even when it's very obvious that they need it. I had that happen when I was a principal, that there were some very clear needs and the parent refused.
So what that means is if they refuse the services, and I don't really like to look at this in terms of liability because obviously I trust all the experts that are involved in this thing, but when I hear something that seems to me that the vast majority of the evidence is that the parent is making, and I understand parental rights, don't get me wrong on that, but there's no other option to look at besides just accepting what the says. And if they do that, do they sign off on saying we understand that the school's no longer responsible for, even though they're recommending these particular services, the school's not responsible for delivering them?
Yeah, it is. It certainly is documented in a either a screening or a meeting that parents are refusing. I think the one exception would be if the disability, if refusal to provide the service meant that the student could be at harming himself, harming others, then you might be able to step in with some other resources. But absent that this child is a danger to his or herself or others, my experience is they can refuse services.
And I guess that really is kind of getting to the core of the question I had, because I guess we can all think of various scenarios, and hopefully they don't happen, where a parent, for whatever reason, wouldn't make the decision that most people would believe would be in the best interest of the child. And I would guess that would probably, particularly with this very vulnerable group of students, be very could result in some very dramatic consequences, I guess. There's no way to, for instance, if a parent is doing something that is just patently contrary to the best interest of the child, is there no way to go through either a court proceeding or any other way to at least have an arbitrary, I mean, not an arbitrary, but an impartial arbiter determine that, hey, we understand you're the parent and all that stuff, but for instance, medical issues and those sorts of things, and you've seen it before where courts have had to step in because someone was not using good judgment on it. And I'm not trying to rewrite the law or anything. I'm just trying to really understand it, because I guess obviously they're children. Yes, and someone else is making the decision for them, and we trust that the parent's going to make the best decision, but we've also seen where that's not been the case. That's my only concern, Mr. Weston. I'm just trying to understand the process more than questioning whether or not that was accurate or not.
Well, Mary just laid it, said what I said may not be 100% accurate. So let me defer to her.
Yeah, I would just like to clarify that, Mr. Weston, in the beginning, this was the application that was submitted from PSAS, not from the district staff when you were first addressed the question. But I would like to allow Ms. Kasevich to weigh in on that question. Sandy?
Thank you very much. Actually, the way that was written indicated that no matter what, the parent had final decision. A parent is part of an IEP team. They always have the right to refuse services. Under the law, in the benefit of a child, a school district also has an obligation to support the needs of the students, and as such may have to act on the students' behalf in deference to the parent's decision. So the statement that parents always have the last say is not necessarily true. The law is very explicit that IEPs and special ed is designed to meet the specific needs of an individual student to ensure his or her academic, social, and emotional progress through their childhood and their school career. So the statement in terms of parents having the right to say, I don't want services, is a true statement. It is also true that the school district, surrogates, or others may act on behalf of the child. because we meet as a team, not as individuals. I hope that helps clarify.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you. And that's the only question I had.
Mr. Farrell?
Thank you, Mr. Weston, for your report, and thank you and Mr. Martin for the clarification you provided to Dr. Wright's question. That was the concern that I wanted to bring up too. Those are very important topics in the education system, very important students, which is why it's part of the application. And why it's asked for specifics in the application. So I would also like to see those specifics outlined. I am relieved to know that they're being served and being served properly, but I think that we do need the documentation to show that. I'm glad to know that the district and the PSAS work closely on those matters. I had one more point. I guess that's it. So I would like to echo the request to have that further documented, just because I believe it's so important. But I am glad to know that it's happening.
Ms. Clementi? Barb, I think you're muted.
I am. Better. Thank you. I appreciate those suggestions, and we'll look forward to seeing the results. I have a question about waivers, and I'd like to see, as that negotiations goes forward, I saw a pretty clear breakout of statutory waivers, but I'd like to see a breakout of the previously approved waivers and the newly requested waivers, and the rationale with those. I think that'll be important for us to look at and understand. Did I miss the time frame discussion? What is the time frame of this application?
Well, again, let me defer to Melissa and Dick pretty much, but what if the board were to approve the renewal, you can certainly put into the renewal, into the new contract, that issue has to be successfully negotiated by 60, 90 days after the contract, or it could, well, again, Melissa and Dick can weigh in. It might be something that gets worked out before it's approved. I don't know. I'll let Dick and Melissa weigh in.
Mr. Voss, can you hear me? I don't think I can get the video going, but can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
This is Dick Bump speaking. Thank you, Mr. Voss, members of the board, and Superintendent Macaluso. I think on that point, we did get a supplemental response from PSAS with respect to the policy waivers. And let me read that to you, because I think this is a commitment to work with us going forward in the contract. And it basically says that to the extent that PSAS does not have a school-specific policy in place on a particular matter, it will follow all applicable district policies. Further, if a policy has been delegated to the charter school without a replacement policy in place, PSAS will adhere to the substance of the district policy, but will simply administer and execute that policy at the school level rather than the district level. So I think those are the issues that we will be working through during the contract phase if the board were to renew the charter application. And then as a footnote to the judge's question, I think that in my experience, if a parent is so irresponsible that they don't follow a recommendation that is unanimous by the team, I've seen in circumstances where it might be appropriate to refer that to the county attorney for a dependency and neglect proceeding, or there have been occasions in my experience where the district itself initiates a due process hearing in order to have a hearing officer determine that the IEP is an appropriate thing for the student to follow. I'm not sure that there has been an order that follows that kind of due process hearing, but those are two legal options, Judge, that I thought I would mention since I'm on the line.
If I may, I'm not sure I understand about the waivers, Mr. Bump. Are you telling me that that piece that you read supersedes any of the newly requested waivers?
No, what I think this tells me is that to the extent that we don't have a specific policy that's listed, for example, on PSAS's website, and it's a policy required by law, they are going to follow the district policy. To the extent that they, and so that to me is that commitment. To the extent that there's a policy that.
Sure, that's.
Go ahead.
I understand that, and I see that. Although in the piece that I looked at, I thought it went through every standing district policy and checked either that the policy did not apply or that they had their own, which would seem to counteract or countermand what you're just saying. But my interest is in the newly requested waivers that have not been part of the contract for the last 20 years, that are being newly requested with this application. I need to see those broken out and a rationale, please.
So there are two types of waivers, as you know. One of them is a statutory waivers, and there are a few new ones, but none of those seemed at least remarkable, I think, to our review legally, except the one that would still have the Board of Education be the ultimate authority in terms of expulsions of students. In other words, a parent of a PSAS student could still come back to the Board of Education. We think that's an important item to retain. It's in the contract now, and we're suggesting that that remains so. Beyond that, I think the other statutory waivers, many of which have been moved from automatic waivers to discretionary waivers, so they have been automatic in the past and therefore don't present a problem. And so we'll evaluate those again, and to the extent that you might review those and have concerns, please let us know, and we'll be happy to maybe give you a legal opinion about our analysis of that or decide whether or not it's something that the board should waive. The policy waivers, I agree with you. There was a list that had two columns. One was policies that had been delegated, the other one that did not apply. We've been operating now with Fulton Heights for, I think, 4 or 5 years, and with Jones Campus beyond that. And so I think there's some understanding that we have not, if we had not requested those specific policies before, maybe we should have done that. But now is the time, I think, to try to cure that. As I understand it, the column listed as delegation means only that, for example, an evaluation of a teacher, for example, rather than the district doing that, PSAS would do that. So we'll work through those delegations and see if that is in fact the case. We had asked for a third column to be presented as well, which would be any replacement policies that may depart from the district policy. So we have some work to do there, but I think PSAS has indicated that they're willing to work with us on that. We'll have 2 more weeks now until the 26th or so, roughly, to be talking about that, and then we'll have a full 90 days during the contract process if the board renews the contract to work on those. But thank you. I understand that's an important thing for the board, and we understand and appreciate that, and we'll work on that.
Thank you. And to be clear, my response was that statutory waivers are there, and they're broken out, and there's nothing to be done with that. We have previously studied and approved a set of waivers that have been in place all along. What I am interested in is a breakout of all of the waivers that are being requested that have not previously been requested, and the rationale that goes with those. Then you and the attorneys can do your work and come to us with a proposal, but I would like to see that that information specifically broken out rather than just kind of buried in with everything else.
Okay. So just with respect to the statutory waivers, I believe that their entire list does have, except for the automatic waivers, does have a replacement plan and a rationale, but we'll make clear whether or not.
That's
I'm
all
sorry?
there. I don't need that. That's very well done.
Okay, you just want to know if it's a new waiver or a waiver been approved before.
It's beyond
Okay,
the statutory waivers, yes.
That's easily enough to do. All right, got it.
Thank you. I'd also like clarity on the time length of this application.
So the timeline is that the board is planning to.
I'm sorry. Let me be clear. I get the timeline is generally the same. I want to know how long if this is renewed, how long this contract will be in force.
Okay, I understand now. Our recommendation would be that we approve the contract, if the board does approve it, for a 5-year term starting in 2021. That would make it then have a term that coincides with the Jones school, which promotes efficiencies in the future as far as reviewing the network schools.
Thank you.
We had heard from Dr. Wright and Mr. Farrell in regards to additional information and documentation specific to those student populations. Judge Mays, I'd like to hear if that's something you would like to request as well.
I'm comfortable with the conversation that's taking place right now, and I don't think I have anything further to request. I just I don't mean to beat a dead horse, but I did have some concerns about the question I asked, but it's been answered to my satisfaction. And you know, to the extent that there might be some confusion on it, I would simply ask Mr. Weston and the staff of PSAS to review that, and so that everybody's on the same page as far as that concern is. Thank you.
Mr. Voss, this is Dave Martin with PSAS. Would you mind if I just made one comment?
Sure, that'd be okay.
So if Mary would like to send the language that she kind of quoted there at the end, we'll take a look at that and try to get those revisions into our application so that it's not that we're just completely deferring to the parents, that we're actually explicitly stating the process there. So we have no objection to that.
Okay, great. Ms. Clementi, I'd also like to hear how you feel about the additional information as well. Ms. Clementi, can you hear me?
Oh, yes, I support the requesting that information, as well as the information that I personally requested. Am I answering the right question here?
Yes, you are.
Okay.
I'd also be in support of seeing that additional documentation as well. Are there any other questions from the board? Okay. Mr. Weston, we can move to CHPA.
Okay, thank you. Again, as I mentioned with PSAS, the CHPA leadership, their administration, faculty, and staff, conjunct with their community, have done everything imaginable to sustain an educational program for their students, like District 60 has and so many schools across the state of Colorado. Onto the academic performance, one of the interesting challenges CHPA faces are the number of students who come to them as new students whose readiness in reading and mathematics in particular show a year or more below grade level. The good news for CHPA in terms of enrollment is it is growing again, which is nice for them for financial viability and all of those things. They're over 1,000 students again, and they're holding that. But what they found is most of the new students coming to them are well below grade level, and so some of the data that I provided just in kindergarten alone, beginning of the year, and this is a combination of new and existing students. But 92% of kindergartners coming in were one grade level below. And so that was a concern. As you look at their iReady math beginning of the year tests, the trend in terms of 2 or more grade levels below continues to increase from kindergarten through the 8th grade, 2% to 81%, and that is a concern. However, the 1 grade below, it's actually a positive trend that goes down from grades 1 through 8, so fewer and fewer are in that mark. But that continues to be a great challenge for CHPA is just student achievement. The iReady reading beginning of the year, again, a positive trend in the single grade level below. It starts at 86%. By grade 8, it's 15%. So that's a good thing. But again, 2 or more, it starts at 2% and goes the opposite way to 69% in reading grades 1 through 8. So that's a continual battle for them. The middle level, same thing. If you took a look, single digits above grade level and high 50%, 3 or more grades below. Same thing with iReady mathematics. The high school, as been the case for many years, is the best news in terms of academic achievement. The percentage of students performing at the nationally normed achievement level was relatively high in math, reading, science, and language usage, as high as peaking at 92% 9th grade language usage, 89% for 12th grade reading. So that was a good thing. The 9th grade math, above projected growth. 10th, 11th, and 12th grade observed growth was a little below projected. Reading was far higher than projected. Language use, 9th grade, far higher than projected growth. So there's some good news. One of the other phenomena that happens, however, with CHPA is that after 8th grade, that is their biggest attrition. They lose more students after 8th grade who return to, lack of a better term, the home school, the family's home school. So they stay with CHPA through the 8th grade, but then I think it's there's a lot of pressure on kids. Hey, I went to South or I went to Centennial, you're going, and they do. Now, one of the good things that's happening with CHPA is their plan right now, if the refinancing of bonds, and this goes into the financial issue and operations and governance, they've put forth a plan to have 2 new facilities on the north side of 17th Street to completely get the kids out of those modulars, which some are older than dirt, and to get them out of the old Hyde Park Elementary building and have everything on the other side of the street. That, along with the extension of the road and several hundred homes coming in, has a possibility, it would seem, to build a more complete and tight community where once it's established, you may not see that attrition after 8th grade, that they may, students may be more inclined to stay because it truly creates a much larger community for CHPA. So that'll be one of the interesting things to kind of watch. The challenges they face going forward, like every school, the differentiation challenge is daunting. You can imagine, and I know that District 60 teachers face the same thing. You get a classroom of 30 kids, 10 to 12 of them could be 3 years below grade level. Another 10 to 12 at grade level, another 10 to 12, 1, 2, or 3 above. How do you meet all those needs? And then how do you do that in an online situation? It's even more daunting, and they continue to work at it. Financially, again, enrollment over 1,000, very helpful for them. Reserves in Tabor are in place, no problem. The BEST grant has been resubmitted. They were actually approved last year for a BEST grant. There just wasn't enough funding for them to do it. So they just put that in. The audit was clean and without comment. Operations and governance continues to be very, very strong under Dr. Duran's leadership and Mr. Trujillo's as president of the board. It's a very strong board, very solid board. Mr. Trujillo and one other member, and I'm forgetting who that is rotating off at the end of June, and so they're going to go from a 7-person board to a 5-person board. But it's a strong board, united. They work together. They're doing some very, very good things. They also added 2 higher ed representatives from Maria de la Cruz from Pueblo Community College and Dr. Derek Lopez, CSU Pueblo, to have that piece on their board. They are not voting members, but it does add a dimension to the board, which is nice. Facility master plan is in place, and they're about to embark on a strategic plan. The renewal for them is scheduled in 2022. Terms to be discussed. One of the things we talked about last year was that the school improvement plan would be the catalyst for setting benchmarks in academics. And as soon as we finished the annual report, within days, COVID hit, turned everything upside down. So we'd probably like to return to that benchmark in terms of using the school improvement plan as kind of a template to establish benchmarks for CHPA to hit prior to the 2022 renewal application. So that concludes an overview, and I'd certainly be open to any questions. And I know Dr. Duran is on the line as well.
Dr. Wright, do you have any questions?
No questions this time. Thank you so much.
Judge Mays?
Yeah, there was a reference made that a fair number of students transitioned from other schools to DHPH, and that there were a considerable number of them who were ill prepared for the grade upon which they entered. And I'm wondering, I'm wondering whether or not we might be able to get information as to how many of those were from District 60 schools and the specifics on them. And the reason I'm asking for that is that it obviously impacts on how we believe that we're doing with our students. So I think if we get that information, we could at least throw it into the mix with everything else to make determinations as to where we might need to get a boost in what we're doing, so that if our students from District 60 go to another school, that we don't hear these reports that they're not up to snuff. So I'm assuming that we should be able to get that information. Mr. Weston?
Yeah, let me defer to Dr. Duran, because I know they do chart that, where the kids come from. So let me turn it over to Dr. Duran.
Board Member Mays, yes, we can provide that information to you. It's one that we do provide a report every November to our board about the data in terms of where our students are coming from, where they're going, etc. The incoming students is a mix of people that come from out of state or like from Denver, etc., and kids that come to us from the District 60 and 70. So we do chart that, and we'll be glad to provide that information to your chief academic officer or the superintendent, and so you can take a look at that. And by the way, you know, our kids go to you too. We have this flow back and forth. It would be interesting for us to see how you evaluate our kids as well, to see how they when they get to you. You might. That
I think that. Yeah, I appreciate that, and I'm specifically, obviously, Dr. Duran, I know you're very busy, and with the pandemic, everybody's working double time now. I'm particularly interested in just those students from D60 that transitioned over to you.
Yes, sir, we can provide that. I'll work with Superintendent Macaluso and get that over to you right away.
Thank you.
But maybe
yes, Carol. Sorry, Dr. Duran, go ahead.
No, I was just going to note that this is Mr. Trujillo's last meeting with you. As indicated by Tom, he's rotating off the board as part of our term limits for board members. And if you don't mind, I invite him to make a comment to you. This is the last time he's going to be going for you as a board member.
Sure, that'd be great.
Thank you, Dr. Duran. President Voss, can you hear me and members of the board?
We can, yes.
Wonderful. Well, as always, I greatly appreciate it. I want to start off by thanking Mr. Tom Weston for his continued dedication and support. He is, I would consider, one of the strongest allies, is always there at our meetings, always helping to provide guidance, answer questions when we have those, and allowing us the opportunity to come before you here today. And I certainly have to also thank the leadership of CHPA. The progress that we have made over a number of years has been because of the great work that Dr. Duran and his team have done, along with our students and along with our families. And we underscore and recognize the importance of that. As we look to the future and the horizon before us with building 2 campuses on the west side, it's all about building community for us with our partners at the district, with our families at the institution, and with those that surround the immediate area of the school and how we develop that particular community. But I also wanted to take a minute and just offer my sincere thanks to all of you, members of the board, and certainly Superintendent Macaluso and her team. You know, when we look at educating a child, it truly goes without saying that that old adage of it takes a village. And all of you have been a part of that village with us in educating our students and working collaboratively with our staff on different issues or questions that we may have, and vice versa, the sharing of information. And I've seen an increase of that over the years that I've come onto the board and worked collaboratively with you all. And I just wanted to thank you for that. As I enter my last couple of months as a board member, you know, I look to the horizon and think it's going to be a very positive, very productive one because of all of the work and the groundwork that we've done together. So I thank you very much for that continued collaboration. I look forward to the many good things to come with all of our schools, specifically with CHPA, as we continue to blaze that trail. And as Dr. Duran alluded to and is in the plan, you know, more of that information to come of how we work together and continue that. So I appreciate it very much. And again, to Tom for recognizing the work that we've done specifically on the level of the board. And I thank my colleagues who are not here today, but certainly their dedication and their passion to serving our students is what makes our board operate and continue just like yours as well. So the institution is in great hands. We've got a bright future. We are excited. We are meeting these challenges head on. And I could not be more proud to say that I'm alum of both schools within our district and CHPA, and the future is bright for us all. So thank you again for the opportunity to join you this afternoon.
Well, Mr. Trujillo, thank you for your service, and we'll miss seeing you at these meetings.
I'll be happy to come back. Just let me know.
Mr. Farrell, do you have any questions?
I don't have any questions at this time. Thank you, Mr. Weston, for the report. Thank you, Mr. Trujillo, for your service to Chippewa's board.
Ms. Clementi.
I also do not have questions, but appreciate the work of Mr. Weston, Mr. Duran, and thank you, Stephen, for your work, your service and your guidance to Chippewa and to Pueblo's kids. We appreciate it all. Thank you.
And no questions for me, Mr. Weston. Thank you for all of your work. We'll move now to the 2020 graduation and dropout rates report.
Thank you, President Voss. At this time, we'll move to the next report. And at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Ms. Tiffany Den, who serves as our Director of Assessment. Ms. Den, can you hear us?
I can hear you, and I'm going to share my screen with you guys.
Great.
All right, I think everyone can see that now. So good afternoon, President Voss, Superintendent Macaluso, and members of the board. Today I'll be sharing with you our District 60 graduation and dropout rates. Just as a reminder, graduation and dropout rates are always 1 year behind, so the most current rates are going to be from the 2019-2020 school year. So we're going to begin by looking at our 4-year on-time graduation rate, which included students that enter high school and graduate within 4 years. District 60 is in the blue and the state is in the orange. District 60 has steadily increased our graduation rate since 2014 and has remained above the state graduation rate for the past 4 years. So 2017 through 2020, and our 4-year on-time graduation rate for this year is an 82.6%. Here is our 4-year on-time graduation rate by school. 2018 in the blue, 2019 in the red, and 2020 in the yellow orangish color. Central, East, and Paragon all increased their graduation rate from 2019 to 2020. Central has the highest on-time graduation rate of 94.2% of our 4 traditional high schools. And as you know, Paragon is an alternative education campus where at least 90% of the students enrolled are in danger of dropping out and not graduating. The rates listed here only include students that graduated in their 4 years for Paragon, although Paragon graduated more students than indicated here, but they may have been 5, 6, and 7-year seniors. When our schools are rated on the school and performance frameworks, the frameworks take into account students who may need an extra year or 2 to graduate, or who are enrolled in programs such as Ascent or the Community Transition House. Therefore, the state gives us the best of our 4, 5, 6, or 7-year rate. The state expectation for graduation on the school and performance frameworks is an 85%. All of our schools, including our district, will receive the MEETS rating when using the best of graduation rate. The highest level, which is exceeds on the performance framework, starts at a 95%. These will be the rates reflected on the 2021 school and performance frameworks, depending on if we have 2021 performance frameworks this year. This slide here shows our subgroup 4-year on-time graduation rates. The 4-year on-time graduation rate for all students is an 82.6%. Minority students are exceeding all students in their graduation rate, and our free and reduced lunch eligible students are graduating at about the same rate as all students. Our English learners are not graduating on time at the same rate as their peers. Our exceptional student services are graduating about 56% of their population within 4 years. Some of these students do take an extra year or 2 to graduate or transition to the Community Transition House prior to receiving a diploma or a completion certificate, and are included in our 5, 6, or 7-year rates. Our best of rate for ESS is our 7-year rate, which is a 71.6%. And this will be the rate that will be used on the school and performance frameworks. And just to kind of give you a frame of reference, the state 4-year ESS rate is a 61.8, and their best of rate is a 76.3%. Here are our 2020 dropout rates. Dropout rate is an annual calculation. It's the total number of dropouts divided by the total number of students enrolled at any point during the 2019-2020 school year. Because it is an annual calculation, the same student can potentially count as a dropout each year beginning in the 7th grade. Schools and districts do receive points on the performance frameworks for dropout, and the state expectation for dropout is that it is at or below a 2%. On this graph, the most recent year, 2020, is in orange and 2019 is in blue. Our district decreased our dropout rate this year by a 0.3% to 1.3%, which is below the state's dropout rate of a 1.8%. And over the last 2 years, our district has decreased our dropout rate by 1.2%. In addition, Central, Paragon, and South decreased their dropout rate. Central currently has the lowest dropout rate of 0.4% of our 4 traditional high schools. Paragon Learning Center has also steadily decreased their dropout rate, which was 16.2% in 2018 to a 6.7% in 2020. The state dropout rate for alternative education campuses is at a 14.7%, just to give you a point of reference. And then finally, the last slide I have to share with you is our dropout rate for our subgroups. The dropout rate for all students is at a 1.3%. Our free and reduced lunch eligible students are dropping out at a rate of 1%, and our minority students are just behind at about a 1.18%. However, our English learners and our exceptional student service students are dropping out at a higher rate than their peers. We do receive points on the school and district performance framework for all students as well as subgroups, and again, that rate is expected to be at or below 2%. And that is all I have for you. If you have any questions, we would be happy to answer.
Dr. Wright, any questions for you?
First of all, I want to thank you very much for your report, and I'm glad to see great improvement for our district. I just have a couple of questions, and it may be something maybe superintendent may help with. With our English learners and our ESS population, since right now that seems to be where we might need to do some improvements, what type of interventions or can we do or are we doing to address their discrepancy in their dropout and or graduation rates? I'm just trying to make sure we're moving forward for all our students.
Thank you for those questions. My team is already digging into the data and has already done an analysis on that, and they already have an action plan. I know certainly with ESS, I can have Suzanne Morey speak to that. I know that she has been working with the team in terms of the numbers that are already coming out. Ms. Morey?
Sure. I'm actually going to pass it on to Sandy Kasevich. She and I have had quite a conversation about that alongside Marcy Imes, who is the executive director of high school. And so, Sandy, do you want to share a little bit of what you found and some of the next steps, as well as if you could clarify the difference between a graduate and someone who completes with a certificate?
I'd be more than happy to. We know where every single one of our students is, what has happened to them. I want to preface by saying the four-year graduation rate for ESS is a little misleading, since IDEA tells us we can keep students through their 21st birthday to provide their educational services. So to put that in perspective, the number of students who started in 2016 as ninth graders with ESS, any one of the 13 identified categories, were 126 students. 71 of those students did graduate on time in 4 years. 36 of those students have gone on to the CT house. Since they've been at the transition house, 16 of them are still attending, working on their programs. 7 of them received their diplomas in December, just before Christmas. 1 student moved to Iowa, 1 moved to Alamosa, and 11 students received certificates of completion. A certificate of completion is allowed under the law as a non-academic certificate for students who will not ever be able to meet the academic requirements of a state or a district's graduation program. These non-academic certificates of completion are accepted in community colleges and in many four-year schools. However, for the purpose of this report, those students are listed as completers, and completers are not considered graduates. So in the data, they show as dropouts, and they truly are not. We actually did have in that four-year group 19 students who disenrolled for a variety of reasons. Some of them, parents disenrolled them to move elsewhere. 2 of the students were on runaway status. One student got married and moved away. 4 students moved, had their parents withdraw them because they were going on to online GED programs or Goal Academy or AIM. We have 1 student who had to leave school to support his family financially. We have 1 student who was withdrawn because he is terminal and medically fragile at this time, and they didn't think he could continue. We also had 2 students at PYSC, and as the judge knows, those students come and go from 13 counties. And because we were the last district to have a SACED number, which is a student identification number providing services to those students, and we don't necessarily know where they go next. They may be aged out and go to an adult program. They may be incarcerated elsewhere. But if that SACED number does not show up somewhere else in a public setting in the state, we are charged with a dropout. As far as the 7-year graduation rate, our graduation rate was actually 1.2%. Because of the 88 students in the base who were able to graduate, 64 did graduate. Of those, there were 24 were left. 6 of them received their high school diplomas this fall. 17 ended their high school careers at Christmas with a certificate of completion. And 1 student moved out of state. But because we can't prove that, that student becomes the 1.2 actual dropout rate that we face as a district. Given these numbers and the fact that our schools track the students still tells us that we have more work to do. 67% of the students that we were able to contact said what makes the difference for them to stay in school is a personal relationship. Someone who truly believes that they can become the best person possible, that they take a real interest in them, and that they are concerned about them. To that effect, we have started the process to develop a program that we will be offering for training during the summer academies and into the fall on relationship building using 7 of our most outstanding ESS teachers who are cited by the students as having the ability to build and maintain those relationships. So I'm hoping, Dr. Wright, having some of those numbers helps us look at the dropout rate in a different picture and in a different light. 20 years ago, I sat at the State House with Martin Gonzalez having the same argument about ESS students and what the law says they have in terms of time to graduate. But unfortunately, we still stay with the 4-year on-time graduation rate, which is an incomplete picture of our ESS population. And I'll be happy to answer any other questions that you may have for us.
Well, you know, I'm sorry. Well, you know, Dr. G, you did an awesome job. Thank you so much for, and Assistant Superintendent Maury, you guys, I commend your work. And to have that kind of data, that tracking, to have the program in place to address the needs of those that need that personal touch. Awesome. Thank you so much. And Superintendent, what about the English learners?
Sure. I was just going to talk a little bit about that, and I'll actually allow Ms. Maury to talk about that. But this isn't the first time that we're seeing that disparity. We're already aware of that. And so we had made some changes prior to this year that already are in effect, specifically with the amount of service time that students receive. And that was a really driving force behind the new curriculum adoption. So Ms. Maury, if you want to talk a little bit about those 2 things and add any other that you would like.
Sure, I would just share 2 things. It's important to know that every one of our second language learners do receive 45 minutes minimally every single day, grouped by their language level. So we look at their language level and we group them, and then they receive oral language development in addition just to their regular core classes and so forth. And then those ELL teachers will support them in accomplishing their regular assignments in their regular classes as well. The other piece that I am very, very hopeful for is will be coming to you very shortly with a recommendation for a new 612 language arts curriculum. And one of the look-fors with several ELL teachers on the task force was how well does it support teachers with meeting the needs of second language learners, in addition to other ways of differentiating. And I am very excited about the curriculum we're going to recommend to you for adoption. So I'm also very hopeful that that will really assist us in meeting the needs of our second language learners.
Well, thank you very much. And Superintendent, I just want to thank you and commend you and your staff for your interventions that you're putting in place for our students, the English learners, as well as for ESS. Thank you. Appreciate it.
No problem. The other thing I wanted to mention is that we did engage in a consultant around equity who came in specifically for our English language learner program, and worked with all of our schools to do walks through their building. And through that process, there were some recommendations that we were given. And so we really improved and cleaned up the process for identification of our EL learners. So I think that was a big thing that I think we can look forward to in terms of the future, better identification, and again, just the model in which the way that we're presenting and the amount of time of instruction that we're providing our students. So those are all improvements that we have been making.
Thank you so much.
Judge Mays.
I'm impressed with what I'm hearing today, and I would like to just mention to everybody how proud I am of the entire school district network. Our graduation rate goes up, our dropout rate goes down. Dr. Gusevich, I am so excited about this relationship building that you're talking about doing, and it's no secret, but studies do confirm that the biggest part of determining how successful a student is going to be in their educational experience, K through 8, is based on the relationships that they build and the relationships that nurture them and bring them along. So I am really excited about that. And if I heard you correctly, I'm really excited that the students have identified who those leaders should be. So I'm looking forward to even greater success in the future. The other thing I would like to note, and I applaud all of the schools, but I would like to send out a special thanks to Mr. Mestis and the folks at Paragon for the enormous strides that have been made in that school over the last 2 years. So whatever it is we're doing, let's keep it up. And this is really exciting to get this report. It's not perfect, but it's better than the state's doing. Thank you.
Mr. Farrell.
Thank you, Ms. Den, for the report, and everyone else for your information on ESS and second language learners. So that's very helpful as well. I want to echo some of what Judge Mays just said. It is very exciting to see continued improvement in this area, especially knowing that things continue to be more challenging. And the end of the 1920 school year was not conventional. So it's good to know that that progress continued. I did have a couple of questions which have sort of been answered. And you might not have the information right in front of you, which is okay. I'm just curious. You talked about the state average of the ESS compared to ours. Do you have the state average for the minority free and reduced lunch and the second language learners so that I can compare those?
I don't have it open right now, but I could get that to you.
That would be fine, unless Mrs. Macaluso has it now, maybe. She was reaching for a report. But if you want to send it later, I'm just curious. And then my second question, looking at a school by school basis on the dropout rates, Central went from being the highest in 2019 to the lowest in 2020. Do we know what we attribute that big change to? I'm sure there's a number of things, but have we looked at that? Do we know? Have any thoughts?
Ms. Den, do you want to go ahead and speak to that? I know that you have analyzed that data.
Sure, yeah, Central did see a significant increase in their graduation rate and a decrease in their dropout rate, which is great news. In talking with the staff there at Central High School, they did have a very laser building focus this past year on their seniors, specifically in graduating and not dropping out. They spent a lot of time working with those students to ensure that they were graduating. Some of the seniors that are in danger of graduating do transfer to Paragon, so that still affects our district graduation rate, just affects it at a different school. So we did have a handful of those seniors that transferred to Paragon. And the other thing to keep in mind, Central has a smaller population than our other schools, so smaller numbers of students can make a larger impact on their percentages as well.
That's a good point. That makes sense. But I do want to acknowledge the work that Central staff did in focusing on their seniors. Like I said, I'm sure there's a number of factors there, but I think their work paid off in many ways. So thank you for the report and thank you for the information.
Mr. Farrell, I do have some percentages here. The state graduation rate for Hispanic is 75.4. I have other race and ethnicities if you want any other groups.
I was just looking to compare what was in that presentation, which wasn't broken down that far. So
okay, and then for the English, the limited English proficient was 70.2% at the state level. But we can do that breakdown for you and get that sent out to all board members so that you have that information.
That gives some context to the percentages on that.
Sure, and the economically disadvantaged at the state level was 72.3.
Okay, thank you.
Ms. Clementi.
Thank you. I certainly want to echo the thanks and the pride that's been expressed by the my colleagues, and also to extend my thanks and gratitude to Ms. Morey and Ms. Holcomb for giving me the opportunity to look at that curriculum and the curriculums that were being considered. And I was thrilled to see the second language and ELL focus in the series that were being considered. So thank you. It's great to see that we, as a district, use the data, react to it, and act on it in a very timely and appropriate fashion. Thank you.
And I think all of my questions were answered, but I just want to say thank you as well to all of our staff that is involved in all this great work, because I really think this is something we should be proud of. So thank you.
I agree. I think this is a significant celebration for our district. We're always happy when we continue to increase our graduation rate and decrease the dropout rate. Affirmations to all of the schools and their staff. Central had a significant increase. They are to be commended, as well as all schools. And this is truly a team effort, from teachers to counselors to community advocates. Everybody works hard to support our students. Clearly our work isn't done. We still have 17% of our students that are not graduating. And so Recently, we embarked on a 9th grade success initiative, and I want to commend the staff who are involved in that at our high schools, because I truly think that that will make a difference in terms of examining the practices that we have in place. Because for 17% of our students, we have a system that's not working. And so we must not lose sight. We want every one of our students to be successful and lead a life of purpose and impact. So our work's not done, but I want to congratulate our district and thank all of our staff. Tiffany, thank you for always crunching those numbers and the work that you do. So congratulations, D60.
Thank you, Superintendent Macaluso. With that, we'll move to the school operations update.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to introduce you to Suzanne Morey, and she's going to provide a little update. And I think she might also have other team members talk to you about various topics. Ms. Morey?
Thank you so much, President Voss, Superintendent Macaluso, and members of the board. Today we are going to present an update, and I get to share the best news first. And that is that our students who are enrolled in in-person instruction are coming back to the classroom. And that will occur for our preschoolers, our elementary students, and middle schoolers next Monday, January 18th. Our elementary students will be coming back again 4 days a week. And then the middle school students will return to their hybrid schedule, the Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday hybrid schedule. Our high school students will be coming back 1 week later, and those are the students that are enrolled in in-person instruction this year. They'll be coming back on Monday, January 25th, again on the hybrid Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday schedule. And it's just important for everyone to note that even our fully online secondary students will be transitioning to their hybrid Monday, Wednesday, Tuesday, Thursday schedules, effective the same day that the in-person students are coming back to the classroom on those Mondays. Additionally, when you talk about interventions for students who need customized support, we have been working fast and furiously to realign some of our Title I and Title IV monies at the district level to be able to provide some interventions for students who need additional support. And so we have started working with a group of principals to come up with, at the secondary level, an opportunity for Friday tutoring on the Fridays that we don't have professional development in regular classes. And so each of our middle schools and high schools will be supported by their executive directors in putting together a plan for that. At the high school level, it will be really focusing on our freshmen and our seniors. Particularly those who are struggling to keep their grades up, might need to redo assignments, tests, or quizzes, and complete some things in order to be passing all of their courses before the end of the school year. We'll continue to have the high school summer school coming up. We had a great success rate last summer with the blended model. And so we're going to keep that same approach in place for the high school summer school. And then we're also going to be adding an elementary summer school opportunity that will be in June. It will include transportation so that we make sure that those students who are participating are able to attend, because we will have 4 or 5 sites where we'll be holding the summer school, but it will serve all of our elementary schools. So really excited about those opportunities to either prevent or support any potential learning loss, especially with the last year and the different types of instruction and changes, et cetera, et cetera. Now I'd like to turn it over to Andy Burns from Human Resources. He's going to share an update regarding the COVID vaccine and the Binax Now testing program.
Thank you, Ms. Morey. Good afternoon, Superintendent Macaluso, President Voss, and members of the board. My update will highlight a new COVID-19 testing program called Binax Now that Governor Polis is offering to school districts and I'll also provide an update on the district's preliminary vaccine plans. First, with the Buy Next Now program. Last week, Governor Polis and the Colorado Department of Public Health and Environment jointly announced a new COVID-19 testing program for school districts across the state. The Buy Next Now program has the ability to help districts reduce positive cases as well as minimize additional quarantines for schools. The test can be used for symptomatic individuals, those exposed to COVID, and also for preventive screening purposes. They'll be available to all K-12 districts across the state, and the initial cost will be covered by the state for that first month of the program. The Buy Next Now program will be distributed for at-home use, not to the school district or to the individual schools, but to staff members at home. And the test results would be reviewed with a provider via telemedicine appointment. Results, the nice aspect of it is that the results will be available within a 15-minute period of time. We're presently still in discussions with the Pueblo Health Department on whether they'll accept these tests per the governor's guidance, and then whether we'll want to or be able to participate in the program. If we are able to participate in the program, D60 is planning to use the Buy Next Now test first for symptomatic individuals, and then secondly, for those close contacts without symptoms. So those were individuals that were exposed to someone who was positive, perhaps to prevent the additional spread, and then also to return those individuals to the classroom or to a teaching capacity if they're asymptomatic and then test negative. Tomorrow, there will be a statewide webinar led by CDPHE or the State Health Department on the program, and we'll learn additional information. Everything that we know so far is pretty preliminary, but I'm hoping that we'll get additional information, and we'll share that with our COVID response team and with the board as appropriate afterwards in terms of our next steps. At this point, the state would anticipate that those first shipment of Buy Next Now tests would be sent the week of January 25th. So a pretty quick turnaround for that process. Shifting gears to the vaccine program, we're pleased to report that the district has been working closely and continues to be working closely with the Pueblo Health Department as well as with Kaiser Permanente on vaccine options for our staff. As you probably know, the state's current vaccine program places teachers and K-12 school staff in the phase 1B part of the state vaccine program. That tier includes people 70 and older, who Pueblo Health is presently prioritizing, healthcare workers, first responders, and essential workers, including educators. During our call with the health department today, health department feels that they'll continue to administer vaccines to those in that 70 plus category, probably through mid-February to even late February. So it could be late February or early March based upon what we know right now, and information does change, and the number of vaccines that is distributed across the states could change. But as of right now, I think they would be looking at additional individuals in that 1B category by the end of February, the beginning of March. Just as an aside, Governor Polis said that he would also like to prioritize individuals in the 65 plus category. So health department will be wrestling with whether the people 65 to 69 would be ahead of some of the other first responders or essential workers. But we are meeting with the health department on a weekly basis, and they're very good about providing us information. Basically, right now, we see two possible vaccine options for district staff: vaccines done in collaboration with the local health department and vaccines offered by Kaiser Permanente. Those two approaches are not necessarily mutually exclusive and may be considered in tandem with one another, meaning that we could partner with both of them at the same time so that we could administer more vaccines to our staff. Over the coming weeks, we'll continue to have these ongoing conversations with both organizations to help flesh out the details and our next steps, and we'll certainly relay that to the Board of Education. As we continue to work with the local health department in Kaiser, we're planning for a coordinated and comprehensive vaccination program and process. That plan will include working with our D60 nurses and health technicians for possible school-based vaccine clinics. We'll also include ongoing communication to D60 staff about the Pueblo Health Department and Kaiser registration process for vaccines, if applicable. In fact, earlier today, we had shared some information with district staff about Kaiser and how to potentially track and monitor the ability to get on a registration list once it becomes available. And then finally, we'll ensure that the strategy and our plan includes a process for communicating, coordinating that second vaccine shot, because it is a two-shot process. It's important to recognize that at the heart of our vaccine plan will be a strong focus on equity and access for all of our D60 employees. We recognize the long-standing disparities in the healthcare system across the United States, so we want to be mindful of these concerns and disparities as we roll out an equitable distribution process for our staff. Both the BINEX Now testing program and the vaccine plans that we're developing are still preliminary, as I'd mentioned, since we're waiting on those specific details from the local health department or from the state. However, we feel confident that we'll be able to act quickly and implement these plans effectively and efficiently as soon as we have the updated information, the timeline, and the related resources. At this point, I turn it back to Ms. Morey, or I'm happy to answer any questions.
My thinking is maybe we just have one more part of this report, and then we'll just open it up for questions. Thank you so much, Mr. Burns. Mr. Macias, if you would share our athletics update, and then we'll open it up for questions, everyone.
Thank you, Ms. Morey. Good afternoon, President Voss, school board members, Mrs. Macaluso. Since we met back in December, on December 22nd, the CHASA announced that they were going to change our winter sports season, which is season B, and we're going to start a week earlier. So season B will now start on January 18th, and competition starting on January 25th. The number of contests have also been increased since the CHASA added the extra week. For example, basketball will now have 14 games instead of the 12 games. In a normal year, we would have 23 games. The same with wrestling, girls swimming, and ice hockey. All the games have been, contests have been increased. The CHASA and the Colorado Department of Public Health sent out a COVID-19 guidelines for each specific sport, and they are lengthy. And so due to time, I don't want to cover each one of those guidelines, but we are working on those guidelines and at each high school, and covering all the variances that CHASA and the Colorado Department of Education have sent to us. Another reason why I won't, because it seems like it changes daily on us. For example, yesterday we received an email from the CHASA on who can be considered essential and non-essential personnel during competition. So we are now working with the Pueblo County Department of Health, because that's what was on the wording for CHASA, work with their Colorado Department, with their public health on who's going to be allowed to attend games. Right now, it is the 12 players, the 3 coaches, the 1 athletic trainer, 1 official scorekeeper, 1 scoreboard operator, that are going to be essential staff, but and I'm sorry, and administrative staff. But now we got to figure out what we're going to do with media, security, and cheerleaders. Are they going to be essential or non-essential? So we're working with the Pueblo County Department of Health on the COVID-19 Safer at Home orange dial, and how are they going to allow us to count that 50, which was before just for the spectators. So we're working with them, and we're also, just a surprise to us, the National Federation Network told us that our Pixelock cameras are ready and will be installed on January 25th. So we're getting all that ready to go so that we can start live stream all of our games, all of our basketball games and our wrestling matches on the NFHS network. And once we get that going, hopefully it'll start on January 27th. Then our parents and our spectators who can't make it to the game can watch the game live on the NFHS network. Now there is a cost, there's a monthly cost. I think it's like $12 a month. So it's not that expensive to get on that. But we're very happy and excited about that part of it. That's all of my presentations. Again, if we have questions, we'll finish to the end.
Mr. Macias, would you mind speaking regarding middle school sports, middle school athletics?
Okay, we met this morning, all the middle school ADs, and with District 70. District 70 did announce last week that they were not going to offer winter sports. And since we are in the same league, the Pueblo Middle School Athletic League, we decided not to have winter sports 2 in our middle school level. And that's due to focusing more on academics. There is a shortage on both wrestling and basketball officials due to COVID-19. Right now, the state and our area officials, we only have 60% who have said they were going to officiate this year. So that's really going to put a burden on not only the officials, because they will be officiating almost every day if we have middle school sports. Another reason why is because we're trying to, again, keep our students safe and our community safe. We will look at offering volleyball in March, and then also the Pueblo Police Athletic League, which is our football league. They're looking at starting on February 22nd and having their full football season, just like we were going to do in season C, but we switched to that season A for football. So they're going to continue with football. I haven't heard from the Rangers Middle School Soccer League, but they're looking at starting probably late February, early March with their season. And then we'll have our track and field season in spring, in mid-April through mid-May. So we're still going to try to offer some sports to our middle school student athletes. But again, we decided not to have the winter sports due to all the restrictions and the COVID-19 guidelines.
Thank you, Mr. Pitt.
Welcome.
Before I open it up to questions, I just want to really acknowledge and thank all of our staff who are working to make all of these things possible. It's easy to say, oh, we're coming back to in-person learning now, or we're going to start athletics now at the high school level, or we're going to have Friday tutoring, or plan for the COVID vaccination in coordination with the health department. It is a lot of work, and it requires a lot of flexibility and a willingness to do whatever it takes. And so I just really want to acknowledge all of our teachers, all of our staff and district departments for what they're doing to make it all work as smoothly as it does. So now, happy to open it up to questions.
Dr. Wright, do you have any questions?
Yes, I just have a couple of questions. First of all, thank you all for the update. Assistant Superintendent Maury, tell me what that blended model is. I know you said the high school students will have summer school. Explain that blended model to me.
So in a nutshell, students are working on curriculum assignments in order to recover credit online, in person, as well as the opportunity once they sort of go home from summer school to continue that work. But they have teachers who are content experts also in the classroom with them to support them with that, to pull small groups to build understanding. So it's blended between in-person, more traditional type of direct instruction and online curriculum and independent work.
Okay, thank you. And how many students will we serve in the high school model and then also in the elementary model?
In the high school tutoring, I'm going to look that up right now, but I'm going to turn it over to Ms. Palumbo about elementary while I'm looking up the high school.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Maury. We should be able to serve about 1,000 students this summer in the 3.5 weeks that we have summer school open.
And what will be the criteria for them being accepted in summer school?
We're looking at serving those students with a significant reading deficit, and those would be students in grades kindergarten, first, second, and third grades. Our data is showing us that right now that those are the students that need the most help and have the biggest gaps.
Okay, and I did not hear middle school. So what about our middle school student?
Mr. Johnson, do you want to share about middle school?
Sure. Good afternoon, everyone.
Our middle school, we think the Friday tutoring, which would be a very similar model to what the high school is doing, we think we would be able to service about each Friday, because we would be doing the Friday, about 120 students at each of our 4 core middle schools. So that's about just a little under 500 students a day at that rate. We might actually see a few more folks than that, because one of the things we'd like the program to be able to do as students experience success is be able to have some of them transition out of the program and bring new students open. But on any given Friday, we'd like to be in the neighborhood of 400 to 500 students at the middle level that we're supporting.
And Dr. Wright, at the high school level with the Friday tutoring, we're anticipating tutoring groups 3 sessions per Friday, each with maybe 8 to 10 students in them. It would be content specific, and at any one time about 320 students district-wide. But again, as Mr. Johnson said, it would be based on need and it would be flexible. So if students are able to pick up their grades and no longer need it, but another student is requiring some additional assistance, they would be able to sort of come in and out. And again, at the high school level, the focus will be for our freshmen and for our seniors.
Okay, so is this tutoring for middle school going to continue through the summer or just during the school year? That wasn't clear to me.
At this time, when we went, based on the budget that is available, when we went to the principals and asked what they felt the most impactful approach would be, as well as whether it was summer school or Fridays where they could get not only the staff but the students to come and attend, they felt they wanted to be proactive and use the Fridays. So at this time, that's where we have focused the budget for middle schoolers, is on the Friday tutoring.
Friday tutoring during the school year.
The remainder of the school year to start in early to mid-February and then to go through May.
Okay, thank you. And I have one other question, but it may fall under the consent agenda. I just had a question about the grant money for the hotspots. So President Voss, can I ask Ms. Maury now or wait until we get to the consent agenda?
You can go ahead and ask now.
Okay. First of all, I'm so glad for the opportunity for the additional money, because I know that was really a concern about trying to reach our students who had trouble with connectivity with the internet. And I like the fact that with this money, we will be able to give them other carriers and services. My understanding with the T-Mobile that there were some problems in certain areas with people having that internet connection. And I apologize for my camera being off, but the computer is acting crazy and apparently it works better if I turn my camera off. So no disrespect, just trying to stay online. So I just wanted to ask, I know that counselors and teachers, those that sometimes worked at home, had connectivity problems. I know our students will be getting the additional hotspots if they're having problems. Does that extend to staff as well? That's my question.
Hi, Dr. Wright. This is Zach in technology. Good afternoon, members of the board. Yes, that is one of the reasons we went after that grant, was to also extend that to help staff and kind of pick up any potential gaps that may be in existence. You know, we were able to take really good advantage of T-Mobile's Project 10 Million. And that has done a huge service to our students. But, you know, on occasion, there are pockets and there are some places where maybe the signal's not as great, or we have some families that have a couple of people, you know, a couple of students that are having some issues, or maybe the window in their house or their apartment or wherever they live, the signal's not quite as great. And so we went after this to try to help fill in those gaps. And so our hope and intention is to also include for staff members that need that access as well.
Okay, thank you so much. And Zach, you know how much I commend your staff and your team. So you're one of my heroes, because you've rescued me many times with this computer. But I want to thank you all, Mr. Johnson, all the rest of you. Thank you so much for your help. Bye-bye.
Judge Mace.
I mentioned way back in March when things kind of turned upside down that the steps that were being taken by the district to address COVID-19 were fantastic. I thought at the outset we wrote the primer for how things should be done. And I am impressed again today to hear about all of the hard work that's gone into this to stay up with everything. And I know that it's a 24/7 job that people are doing. And I'm just so thankful that nobody has given up on the task that we have at hand, in spite of all the difficulties that have been presented to us. And I'm always impressed with the depth of the reports that we get from the people that are on the front lines addressing this on not only a day by day, but an hour by hour manner of operation. So again, a big thank you to all the folks in D60 that have gone above and beyond to ensure that our children are receiving the education they do deserve. We understand that it's not perfect, but we had to reinvent the wheel this year. And I think D60 has done a pretty darn good job of doing that. So thanks to everybody that's been involved with that.
Mr. Farrell.
Thank you once again, everyone, for the reports. I think my questions are mostly for what we've heard from Mr. Burns. I'm sure, like most of us, I was excited to know that teachers were put in a higher priority for vaccinations and school workers. I just wish that some of that rollout was going a little smoother than it is, that we could get there faster, but there's light in the tunnel now. And I'm thankful for everyone making sure that we can continue moving forward with that. And my question was about the testing. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I heard that the first month of testing would be covered cost-wise by the state. Is there any indication of anything beyond that? Would it become the district's responsibility to continue based on what you know now? I know
Sure.
it's changing.
The governor definitely wants to make the testing available through this school year, and wants to make it cost effective for districts. What he has shared so far is two options that are on the table, and perhaps I'll learn more at the webinar tomorrow. One would be a cost share with a district to try to make it as cost friendly and budget friendly as possible. Secondly would be reaching out to the incoming Biden administration and trying to receive federal funding for it as well. So I do know the governor is actively seeking federal funding to support this initiative as well. That's the extent of what we've heard so far, and certainly can report back to Superintendent Macaluso and others after tomorrow's call, because they have listed pricing as one of the agenda items for tomorrow's conversation.
Good to know. And like you said, it changes day to day, minute to minute. It seems like I'm always hearing something new. So I appreciate the information as you know it today. And that's all I had. Thank you, everybody, for your updates.
Ms. Clementi.
If I could piggyback on Mr. Farrell's question, if how many tests would be provided for 1 month?
So what we're looking, sure. So the state has ordered hundreds of thousands of tests. Capacity and volume, from what we've been told, is not going to be an issue or concern. We've already put in a request for the state that would cover an appropriate number of tests for all of our staff, which I believe is right around 3,000 staff members that we have. And so as of right now, there's actually a surplus of tests that are available from Binex. A couple other states have started the Binex program. I believe Massachusetts was the first state to roll that out in December, perhaps in Advent for starting the beginning of January. So there's been millions of tests that have been purchased by the feds from eMed, that's the medical provider that oversees BINEX, and those are being distributed to states with a strong emphasis on prioritizing education. So from what we've gathered, either for the first month or beyond, it does not seem like volume will be a concern from the state, just knowing the federal contract that was administered between the feds and eMed, the medical provider.
Great, thank you. Do you have a ballpark cost for each one of those tests? I'm concerned when we start taking over the purchasing of those.
We are equally concerned, so I think we're cautiously entering this engagement. Superintendent Macaluso and Mr. DeCessor and I are very cautious and concerned, and want to see how this is going to play out as well. Could be that the timing could play well in terms of having the BINEX kits, and then for the month of February, perhaps a second set of test kits for March. At that point, there would be a strong hope that our teachers are getting the vaccine at that point. So perhaps it would not be the case that we would need to order tests through the end of the academic year, but perhaps for a 1 month period of time using the state's program of free tests, or perhaps looking at it beyond. But yes, we absolutely want to make sure that this fits within the budget. And I believe that the governor has already heard from several school districts about the concern of an additional expense in an already challenging year, and how to make sure that this is friendly for districts.
Thank you. In order for each of our communities to understand what's being invested and provided here, do you have just a ballpark figure about what each of those BINEX tests costs?
I do not.
Okay, that might be nice to have. I on the same point, or the same, well, talking about the vaccine, I'm glad that we're being organized and moving forward so that we'll be ready to go when those vaccines are available to our educators. Any opportunity to bring the vaccines to our school buildings and to our employees, I think makes a whole lot of sense. Otherwise, in many other places, you've got employees having to take sick time or leave their buildings to make the appointments to go get the vaccine, and that really doesn't make any sense. Also, if there is some advocacy that you or Superintendent Macaluso or anyone might suggest for us to try and move this whole process along so that we can get our educators vaccinated sooner rather than later, I would love to have that information, and I'm sure the rest of our board would too, so that we can do what we can. So if that comes up, let us know. I'd like to ask a couple questions about sports, if I may.
Sure.
Mr. Brasisi, NFHS network, is that available on any program? Is that through DirecTV? Is it Comcast? Or I'm thrilled that we'll make that available to people.
Yes,
how would I find it?
Yes, you would get on the NFHSnetwork.com, and it will show that you would log on to that. And
so it'll stream online.
Yes, it'll stream online.
Okay.
And you'll see the school. You'll just search Pueblo East, and it'll pop up on what game is being telecasted at that time. And then again, you have to pay that fee, and it's $12 a month. So not too expensive, but it's if you have a smart TV like I do, I could watch it on my big screen at home. So it's really nice to have, and with the Pixel Lock camera, we can do it both. You can have it automatic to where it just follows the play of the game on the court, and or we can have somebody manually work the camera. So either way it will work. Again, if we're allowed to count our camera people to be essential, then we can have somebody there. But if we're not allowed that, then we'll probably put it on automatic and just go with just the camera. So or thing like that. Yeah.
So this is a streaming service, and you would
Yes.
stream it to your TV, but it's not a channel on your television.
No.
Got it. Thank you. I appreciate all the work with middle school sports, and I know that we have great partnerships with our club sports and community organizations that help with particularly middle school sports. Many of those organizations use our facilities. Do we have a requirement that those facilities follow the CHASA guidelines in terms of masking and distancing and how many people are there, that kind of thing, when they're in our facilities?
Yes, once we open our facilities back up, they're still closed at this time, but once we open that up, they would have to turn in their guidelines to us, and they must follow those guidelines under which dial we're in. If we're still in the orange dial, or which is the next one is yellow, they'd have to follow that dial. And I also turn those in to the county to make sure that they have a copy of that. So our school copy, I get a copy, and so does the county.
And so, so it's possible that those basketball teams could be practicing in church gyms or other facilities and not be necessarily following those CHASA guidelines. Yes?
Yes, yeah. Club and outside groups out of our jurisdiction.
Right? Okay. Thanks. But will certainly impact what we can do and how healthy our students are.
Yes.
Last, two more questions. One for Mrs. Maury. I'm impressed that you were able to staff a Friday school and a summer school, given all the uncertainties and difficulties and stress that this last 12 months has created for all of us, and especially for people who try to teach school.
Every school is going to need to come up with their own plan. And so we haven't staffed it yet. Each school is going to reach out, and, obviously we would pay the individuals to be there. We've also thought about how can we create a schedule that maybe the administrators who are overseeing it and or the teachers wouldn't have to be there every Friday. Can we maybe do it in chunks? So for the first 4 weeks and then the next 4 weeks, because we absolutely do recognize that, and we want to make it doable for our teachers because we need them to support our students. So we are going to have to be creative.
Yes, I just know I taught summer school one year in a year that it wasn't stressful, and it almost put me over the edge because there's not that downtime. So thank you to all of those employees, teachers in particular, who staff those and provide those opportunities for our kids. Last question for Mr. Mather, please. The hotspots are a great deal, and I appreciate that we've got them. Are they sufficient for a student to be online all day, 4 days a week?
Yeah, that's
Or a teacher?
It's a great question. I would say the answer is it's probably not sufficient, but it's the best that we can do, and it gives more opportunity than nothing, if that makes sense. The up speed or the upload speed is okay. It can struggle, right, with video conferences or like what we're doing now and some other things, but it is connectivity. There are some other things that we're continuing to look into, but it's kind of the easiest, most simple and cost-effective deployment that we have available right now.
Thank you. I am aware that Comcast is creating some open Wi-Fi network spots up and down the Front Range, and there should be 2 or 3 here in Pueblo. So that should help some, and perhaps we could talk with them about extending that or partnering with them so that there are some of those open Wi-Fi spots available.
Yeah, I was on a call with Comcast not too long ago about that, and they have 2 here in Pueblo. They're partnering with the Boys and Girls Clubs to do most of that, and so there are some other options. I think the other concern though with that is when you have limited people in an area, that's a great thing, and you can maybe sit in the parking lot, but your access is so there. So I mean, there are options still coming, and Comcast is doing more. So we'll see what that turns into.
President Voss. President Voss, before we move on, I want to take an opportunity to clarify some question that Dr. Wright had and give HR, if I could ask Mr. DeCicero to maybe chime in on this, because Dr. Wright did ask about hotspot usage for staff. That's certainly not, we're not able to do that on a widespread basis. That's really been on an individual hardship case. That's why Mr. Mather indicated that he was seeking additional funding, but I'd like to give HR, Mr. DeCicero, an opportunity to respond to that, if I may. Mr. DeCicero.
Yeah, Secretary Macaluso, that was one thing I would like to comment on. I think as Mr. Mather just kind of alluded to, there are some limitations to those things. We also have a great setup within our buildings where people have access to the materials and things that they need to be able to do the work and not have those limitations that occur. So I think these really are, once again, it was a grant to try to get additional ones for hardship cases, to limit that to hardships for to get our students access more than anything, because we do have that access point in our schools for our teachers to be able to do their work and the things that they need to do online, which is always going to be the preference than worrying about bandwidth and limitations and how many gigabytes are left and all those things that come along with those hotspots.
Great. I want to echo thanks to everyone for all the work that's happening everywhere across the district in every one of our classrooms. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you for the update, and just to echo that as well. Thank you to our entire staff for everything that you're doing. We'll move on now to the 2020-2021 proposed amended budget update.
Thank you. So at this time, I'd like to introduce Mr. Dave Horner, who serves as Chief Financial Officer. Mr. Horner, he's going to present our amended budget.
Good afternoon. I'm going to share a budget document. So this budget document that I created along with the help of Lana and Christy and the accounting staff is almost old news already. I'm amazed how fast things are changing as the information comes down from CDE or from the federal level and the funds and everything. So before we get to an actual document for you to adopt at the end of January at your regular meeting, there will be some other modifications made to this. And I'll talk to some of them we don't even know what is going to come down, because every time we have a meeting with CDE, things are slightly different than it was the week before. But here's our best understanding of where we're at right now. Let me pull down, and I am assuming everybody can see this okay. Somebody give me a thumbs up. Or
yes, we could see it just fine, Dave.
Okay. Tried to make it big enough. All right. In our student fees, each year we ask you to adopt the student fees, because we have a few minor changes This year, there's a fee for science at Fountain with a variable fee rate. Yearbooks at our high schools, we didn't have a line item for that, or the JROTC at East, and that's the only differences from what we had seen before. It is highlighted in red on if you have a colored version of it. So real minor changes there. The real information is, oops, don't want to make everybody dizzy as I move this. As we get to our regular general fund, in December, we talked about the state made an adjustment in the funding run because they had included federal money for at-risk students inside the allocation to us. And for us, it was 1.6, between 1.6 and 1.7 million in 1.67 million, 1.679 million. We had to then track that separately, and we did. We moved it to Fund 22, which is all our grant funds, which is what was recommended to us. And we moved expenditures over to that related to serving our at-risk population. We moved salaries and benefits of about 1.44 million. And then we also made an allocation of 231,000 to our charters for the 1.679 million. The one thing that as Lana and I were reviewing this today, we figured out we did not reduce the revenue showing in general fund. So we have to reduce the revenue, even though CDE is saying it's all general fund revenue. We moved the expenditures to the grant fund, so we have to move the revenue over to the grant fund. Well, we moved revenue over there, but didn't reduce it. So there will be another reduction on this line that says state share equalization of the almost $7 million in the next run. So that does change as we go through the document. I'll try to bring that up as we get down a little further. The other piece that the federal government just approved a new funding for us. They're calling it ESSERS 2 because it's following the same rules as ESSERS 1s. We had, as part of the CARES Fund, we received, they categorized it as CRF fund, which we will show you that we spent, and that has really saved our budget this year. Very much last year and this year was needed so that we could keep our people employed, deal with the declining enrollment and all the other issues that, you know, everybody else has been talking about. Now there is a new fund that we have seen a preliminary allocation of, and for the district, it's just over $19 million in the preliminary run. That we also have to share with our two charters. They are still determining exactly how we're going to do all these things. The application, it will be a reimbursement grant, just like ESSERS 1. And so we're working our way through that. The purpose of that, same as with ESSERS 1, is to increase instructional time, you know, deal with the COVID issues and things. I think that, Barb, your conversation about the staff is going to become a very major issue. All districts are looking at how do we increase instructional time so there won't be any, quote, surplus of teachers. You know, you can't go borrow some from another district because they're going to be trying to borrow them from you at the same thing. So I know Suzanne's comments are very timely about that is going to be a challenge. How do we have funds to pay for these things, but how do we find the people to do it, to do all that? You know, there's other opportunities. We don't really need any more personal protecting equipment. We've purchased plenty of that, within for where we're at, but we'll have to work our way down through the guidance and how do we spend that. The only real positive thing out of the ESSERS 2 money, we have until September of 2023 to spend it. For ESSERS 1s, we have till September of 21. So we can look at buying some technology in year 2 and year 3 that kind of helps deal with the damages and the losses and replacement of computers that were presented, purchased out of the CRF funds and out of the ESSER funds and some of those type of things. We're just now starting those conversations. We really haven't had time to have very much of that since it's so new. So in my memo I wrote last week, I did not think that there was $19 million there. So I don't have adequate capacity yet in this document in Fund 22 to have a $19 million grant coming in. So that will be a line item that we'll adjust as we get to that for the next run. So that's part of this ever-changing activity there. As we're looking at one of the other items, if you notice here, or if you can see my mouse going, transfer to athletics. Obviously, our athletics has not been receiving gate fee of, people coming in the gate, selling popcorn, all of those pieces. So we are going to be struggling to have what we designed as a budget so that Rick can stay within it. We're proposing that we need to provide another $200,000 just to have it, get through this year. We'll have to do an analysis for next year as we get there. That's one of the additional items that we're looking at. So this document that we created last year, last week, we were showing a 11% ending fund. As we take out that $1.7 million, it's probably going to bring us back down to about a 10%. The thing that is a concern to Lana and I is this middle column, which is the audited from last year. With our shutdown of spending last spring, we ended up with a 20.7% reserve, and we're now going to be down to 10%. And the only thing that helped us is that we shifted. When I get to one of the next pages, I'll show you the money related from the CRF funds. We shifted a lot of expenses over, but it's still a real challenge. You can't have declining enrollment and maintain the same staffing and expenditure levels go up and maintain a budget. So that is a challenge that we're continuing to monitor, and we'll definitely have more conversations next spring. As we continue looking at our budget, our enrollment went down. We are showing that we're going to have total enrollment of 15,117. That includes our charters. In the audited, pardon me, got tongue-tied here. Last year we had 15,646, and we're going to be down to 15,117. So that's 394 down in budgeted students, which obviously generates less funds for us. The only positive thing for us, if there is something positive, is, as you know, we do a 5-year averaging because we are a declining enrollment district. So that actual decline in funding of students to us is only 130 students. So in the equivalent funding, then there is also, because they took the at-risk money out, there is less per student funding. We are hearing that the legislature, because the at-risk numbers dropped for everyone because they actually overcalculated it, they have funds available that they don't have to make this cut so severe to us. And they are talking that they don't think that we'll get hit this hard, but this is the dollars that we have received on the runs from CDE in December. So we don't have any choice but to actually show this at this decline and hope that it doesn't stay at this amount of decline. Going from, you can see here that we were at 8,299 in our proposed budget to start the year, and now we're down at 8,170. So hopefully the state does not make us all absorb that, because they do have the funds available, because they did budget for us all at that higher at risk and enrollment counts. That's an ongoing conversation. And I know that we'll listen to Colorado Finance tomorrow and see if there's any more thoughts, but you know, that all depends on the legislature. We're also hearing that the legislature doesn't want to develop a school budget until June, after they've gotten both the March and the June estimates of the economy. And I also heard in a meeting yesterday that a lot of the legislative staff people, legislators, didn't get to do their projects last year with their very shortened legislative session, and their projects all need to be looked at for funding this year. So there's going to be a lot of interesting conversations about the use of this funds, whether they should give it to us or take care of the other legislators' desires. So that will be something we have to continue to watch. We are definitely concerned about it. We would like to see a little bit of additional funding come back and not see quite so much. This document always seems like it has a duplication of many things. So the one thing that we have done is we continue to show a page where we try to analyze what we've done to modify the document. There's a page and a couple further that'll help show that we are carrying the CRF offset lines as a separate line, because our salaries and benefits costs didn't go down. We just were provided an alternate way to pay for it this year. But if I just reduce our salaries, then all of a sudden next year when we go back up, it looks like we have a huge increase. And so we're trying to keep it as a separate line item to show. So we did include, you know, our salary increases that were paid after the budget was created. We did settle and provide salary increases for all our staff. We did use the CRF funds and anticipated that we would use that to pay for that. From our CRF funds, we did receive and pay almost $6.2 million of salaries from that. So that is a huge influx of cash that we received into paying our salaries. And we've, you know, purchased additional supplies and everything else out of that. So as I come down to the more easy to see pages where this, so you can see as you look through your budget under our educational regular salaries, we had an offset line of the 5.5 million for our regular education, and then the benefits of 1.7. And then we trying to track this easier so that we can follow it going into next year. I think we've got a budget that is very close to doable and will get us through the year, subject to CDE coming up with some new set of rules or a change. You know, we're following everything daily. We were on a meeting right before this trying to understand more about the ESSERS 2 and how they're going to calculate things. And the wording they were given today was slightly different than the wording they gave last week. So it is a ongoing challenge that all of us are following. And there is funds out there, which is the great thing that they're providing us extra funds. And they've extended the timeline on some of these funding sources. So we feel like we have something that will get us through the rest of the year without having financial major concerns to do it. And we will start the process of looking toward a budget for next year. With that, I don't want to bury everybody in the minutia of the budget. I know you love it. So we'll open for questions.
Dr. Wright, any questions?
Thank you very much for your presentation. I just have one question related to the ESSER 2 fund. First of all, I'm glad that that's been available for us. Again, it gives us some comfort to have some funds that we can use. Help me understand how that may or may not impact our need for teachers for summer school or for the Friday program. Thank you.
It provides funding, and one of the items that is okay to spend these funds on is extended instruction to help recover from the learning loss of COVID. What my comment is, and I know I've had this conversation with Suzanne, is just because we have funds available doesn't mean we can find enough staff to fill the need. And as I listen to the other business managers, they're looking at doing the same thing. So you aren't going to have, you know, a whole community worth of teachers out there that aren't doing anything that would love to come to Pueblo to teach us because they can work in their home district if they want to have additional work. That's what I was trying to say.
Thank you very much.
Judge Mace?
I don't have any questions. Thank you very much, Mr. Horner.
Mr. Farrell?
I know it's a challenge, as always, to keep up with things that are changing. Like I mentioned in other parts of the district operations, but especially in your realm, Mr. Horner. All these things have special requirements, and with influxes of new funds and learning how they need to be tracked. And I appreciate that you're trying to track them in a way that will make it easier when we look at this in the future again. So I don't have any questions. Just thank you for you and your staff's work in tracking all of this and keeping up with the changes.
Thanks.
Ms. Clementi? You're muted there, Barb.
I clicked on one, not the technology. Thank you. I appreciate the work on this. I don't have any questions. When the amended budget is finalized, I'd like to have a hard copy, if I may.
Absolutely.
Thank you for the update, Mr. Horner.
Great.
We'll move now to the consent agenda. Would anyone like to remove either of those items to be voted on separately? Then I will move that we approve consent agenda items 2 and 3.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call for the vote.
Ms. Clementi,
Aye.
Mr. Farrell,
Aye.
Judge Mays,
Aye.
Mr. Voss,
Aye.
Dr. Wright.
Aye.
Is there any other business from the board? All right, seeing none, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.